more love, more joy, everything.
It's inspired young people.
Inspiration comes from within you. When you clear out the garbage that's in your mind, you then create space for something better, more beautiful to come in.
Let's have life and have it more abundantly.
I say yes.
It's like taking a workshop. I get to be in my pajamas.
We have a very active imagination, which is why it's important to learn how to harness it and then point it in the direction you want to go.
I listen to your show every day.
It's time now for Living Your Inspired Life with Susan Burrell. Susan is no-nonsense, inspirational, motivational, and fun.
This is positive talk radio.
Practical wisdom for everyday life.
It's a gift you give yourself.
Now, here's Susan.
Hello, this is Susan Burrell, and you're listening to Living Your Inspired Life on News Talk 1590 KVTA. Welcome to today's show. I am just having such a ball doing this gig. And if you haven't heard our shows prior to this, you go to livingyourinspiredlife.org. We've got all the new shows up and running, and we got shows from when we were on a year ago. So tune in, tune up, and go to livingyourinspiredlife.org to develop your power perspective. That's what we're all about. And the other thing we're all about is really bringing people on that are doing amazing work in the world, consciously supporting humanity in moving to the next level of evolution, and consciously supporting humanity to be what it is here to be on this planet. At least that's my opinion. So today, I'm very excited because I have an author of a really lovely book that I've been reading. It's one of those, it's like the cherries on top of an ice cream sundae for me when I open it up sometimes. You know, the women like to hide chocolate so they can have just one bite. That's what this book is to me. I open it up, I read a couple pages, and I'm good to go. And the book is called Buddhist Boot Camp, and the author is here in the studio with me, Timber Hawkeye. Welcome, Timber.
Hello.
Hello. I want you to tell everybody how this got created. You were sharing that with me before we came on air, and I just think it's a great story.
Yeah, because I never actually set out to be an author or to write a book. I was working in the corporate world. I was a paralegal for 10 years.
Wow.
Working in a cubicle under fluorescent lights.
Ooh.
Working jobs we hate so we can impress people we don't like by buying stuff we don't need. And I realized one day when another paralegal was celebrating her 30-year anniversary at the firm that the fact that she was celebrating 30 years in a cubicle was terrifying.
Oh, gosh.
And that was me in 20 years if I didn't get out, because it's been 10 years for me. So I sold everything I ever owned and moved to Hawaii to lead a simple and uncomplicated life. And my friends wanted me to keep in touch because I didn't have a job lined up. I didn't have a place to live lined up. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew what I didn't want to do.
That sounds really courageous to me, just to say.
I think it would have been more courageous to actually stick it out and work with attorneys for 20 more years.
Oh.
That was scarier than going into the unknown. So I went out there and I started sending them these monthly updates about what was going on in my life. And yes, initially it was very much, oh, I went to the beach today or I went kayaking today. But when I finally did get a job, I was working only 15 hours a week, which actually meant I could study a lot more. And that's my true passion, is to study not just belief systems, but why people believe what they do. That's, I think, where the real juice is. And my emails to my friends became deeper in meaning and more spiritual. And at one point, about 8 years later, I had actually left the island and moved into a monastery that was completely off the grid with no internet or cellular connection or electricity for that matter.
Wow. And
so the emails stopped. And I got handwritten letters from my friends saying, dude, you got to get out of there. You know, we know you like it, but we really rely and depend and wait for these monthly updates from you that are kind of like lights at the end of the tunnel for us, that this life that we have right now, whether it be the job or the fact that we're waiting for our kids to graduate and move away or whatever it is, it's all very temporary, and at any point it can change. And we miss hearing from you, and you're of no service to the outside world if you keep yourself tucked away at a monastery somewhere, which in a way contradicted why I went there in the first place.
Okay, could you speak to that? Because
I think we're here to learn to be completely selfless.
Yes.
And for me to be at a monastery was the most selfish thing in the world I could do because I wasn't being of service. Now, I don't regret going.
Right.
I learned a lot about myself when I was there and our purpose. But I couldn't stay, which was my initial intention, was to make it my home.
Right. How long were you there?
I was at a couple of different ones. I transferred from one that was off the grid to another one that actually had internet connection, and started what was initially going back to about 8 years of emails and putting them on a blog, which then became a self-published manuscript, which was then picked up by HarperCollins and became the book that it is today.
Buddhist Boot Camp.
Buddhist Boot Camp. Just each chapter is only about a page or two long because, again, it's an email or a journal entry from some point in my life. And the chapters have nothing to do with one another. So much like you said earlier, you can open to any random page and just read through it.
Right.
And there's not a single should statement in the book. It's all just a sharing of what was going on in my life and what I was learning. Just an invitation for us to bridge the gap between what we believe and how we act in the world.
I love that. I love that. I'm having conversations with clients and students about that very thing of bridging the gap, because I also am, for me at least, beginning to understand that our potentiality individually is so deep and so high and so interconnected, and that there's many of us that are I'm really grateful you didn't stay in the monastery myself personally, I want to say, because I think there's many of us out there that are those well, for lack of a better descriptor, mystics that are connecting within themselves, and then that's radiating and supporting other people, like you were supporting your friends in connecting within themselves.
Yeah, and it had nothing to do with what people's religious background was, or if they had no faith in anything whatsoever. I mean, that your beliefs don't make you a better person, your behavior does. And that's what the book does, is it invites us to make our behavior more in line with our values, because quite often it isn't. We hold to our beliefs very firmly, but our behavior doesn't always align with that. And that's the invitation to look within and go, how can I be the best version of me there is?
I love that.
Not be Buddhist, not be Christian, but be more Buddha-like, be more Christ-like.
Right.
That's the invitation.
So, Timber, I want you to speak to that part right now, too, because this is I'm so excited that you're here. I can't even stand it, because this is the stuff that I totally agree with, is that there's no one dogma to follow. It's all about, okay, so speak about the Buddha and the Christ. I'm sorry. I'm just tickled.
The Dalai Lama also said, don't try to use what you learned from Buddhism to be a Buddhist. Use it to be a better whatever you already are. You know, it's not about promoting Buddhism. There's actually nothing in the book about Buddhism. It's about just being the best version of you there is, whatever that is, and it changes. You know, as we change and we grow and we look back in our lives and we can look at some decisions and say, that was the best decision I could have made at the time.
Right.
But if I was faced with a different decision to make today, it would be different because I'm in a different place.
Right. And hopefully that's because you're doing your inner work. You're reconnecting every moment,
There's
or as
that,
much as
and
possible.
Everything, you know, time, place, and circumstance also changes. And
Right.
so we have to be so flexible, even with our beliefs, because, and I'll use a very personal example. My ex-girlfriend was very pro-life, and she got pregnant because it turns out that she was epileptic, and the medicine she took for epilepsy canceled out the birth control pills.
Oh, wow.
So in order for her to stay pregnant, she would either have to get off the Tegretol,
What was that?
which
That was
was
for the
epilepsy, which could lead to very violent seizures and potentially her death, or she could stay pregnant and still take the Tegretol, which could lead to serious illnesses in the child or the death of both of them. And so it was really interesting to, you know, my job was to support her in whatever her decision was, and literally stay out of that equation and tell her, I will hold your hand, whether it be in the delivery room or at Planned Parenthood. It's not for me to judge, because this is your time, place, and circumstance. And it was a very difficult decision for her to make.
I bet it was.
and it was very difficult for me to hold her hand. But that is what we are called upon to do, to not push our beliefs on other people, but allow everyone to be where they are at this time in their life, no matter how difficult it may be, especially for parents to watch their kids do something that the parent knows is not in their best interest, but the kid, it doesn't quite know it yet.
Right.
So the first principle of Buddhist boot camp is that the opposite of what you know is also true. And I made it the first I made it the first principle because it is the most challenging invitation.
Say it again.
The opposite of what you know is also true.
That's huge.
It's huge. But when we accept that, and then we realize that what is true for us may not be true to somebody else somewhere else on the other side of the world because of their time, place, and circumstance.
Right.
And that is, like you said, it's huge. And it opens our heart to acceptance and patience and understanding to a point where we can sit with someone who even causes harm to others and have a conversation with them, not for the sake of judging them, but to understand what led you to be where you are now, to do what you're doing, and for that to be your truth. And they'll tell you, and you'll be blown away that you definitely won't necessarily condone their behavior, but you'll have more compassion for the path they've had up until now to get them to where they are.
I want to share a short story, particularly about this, because you just described an experience that I had. A couple years ago. I was at a dinner, a corporate dinner, with my husband and major players in his business, in his company. And I had just started Living Your Inspired Life. They were all excited, wanted to know about it. And so I was sharing that, this week we're talking about the Dalai Lama and what the Dalai Lama teaches. And this woman across from me stood up and started yelling at me. And I was like, oh, and I knew she had just shared with me earlier that she was so excited on the airplane because she sat next to people who weren't Christian, and so she pulled out her Bible. And now I'm not condoning any of that. I'm not saying it's good or bad. But when I mentioned the Dalai Lama, she went ballistic and stood up in this restaurant and was yelling at me and cursing about, talking about, I don't know what, Satan, and so grateful that Jesus was her savior. But my first reaction, her husband slunked away. It was very interesting. And everybody at the table just watched. She was like locked on to me with lasers, And my first reaction was to leave. Like her husband, I'm like, I don't need this. Yeah. And then I quietly listened and heard she needs somebody to hold space for her and witness the fear that she's living with all the time. And so I just sat there and allowed her space from a loving place, non-judgmental, until she was done. It was 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
Yeah. And it's important too. It can come from a place of fear. It can come from a place of joy. I used to have a big aversion to Bible pushers, so to speak, because they came at me telling me what I should do. They were shoulding all over me. Yeah. And I finally realized that it's kind of like someone discovering a really great restaurant in town. And they come, you have to go there. It's really good. It's really amazing. You got to try. It's just the best. And it's kind of like that. And then I'm like, oh, I understand that. I get why it is you like it so much. And, personally, I'm vegan. And I recently gave a talk at a vegan festival. And I was just blown away by how compassionate they are towards animals, but not towards their animal-eating brothers and sisters.
Yes.
They were downright hostile. I'm vegan, but I'm not militant about it.
Right.
And there's a big difference between believing what you believe and allowing others to believe what they believe and trying to push your beliefs on other people. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm not in any way promoting a religion or even a belief system, but kindness, period, and gratitude. I think that just turns everything we have into enough and just opens our hearts. And there's no religion attached to it, and I think all religions are attached to it.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that.
It's the common thread.
Yeah, it is. That whole ancient wisdom stuff, you can track it back through every philosophy and religion.
But much like the friend that you saw at the party, I post a lot of stuff online, and I even got this response from a woman one time. I quoted the Dalai Lama, And she just blew up at me
Wow.
and said, how dare you? And I have no respect for a man who eats meat. And I said, well, how about a woman who judges?
Wow.
You know, and for that matter, whatever he did, or whenever I quote the Mother Teresa, I get a lot of hate mail for that as well. And whatever someone thinks someone may or may not have done that is quote unquote bad does not negate the good stuff that they have done.
Say that again. Oh, I need to hear that right now.
You know, we are not what we have done.
Right.
We are what we choose to become today.
Right.
And if we do something fantastic today, it's not negated by anything that we do in the future or in the past that was not in line with it. We're all on, mangoes on the same tree, and we don't all ripen at the same time. But what is true is that if we're exposed to the light, just like the mangoes, we'll ripen faster. And so it's about exposing ourselves to the light and still being patient, understanding with those that are in the dark.
Right.
That's just where they are.
Yeah. And my mentor that I love and adore, Ernest Holmes, says you start right where you are.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a Rumi poem about come yet again, come to whatever the practice is, and don't go into despair.
And Pema Chodron has a book, I think, Start Where You Are as well.
Pema Chodron. I love her books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying her books. Whenever I used to go to my teachers and say, oh, I love Thich Nhat Hanh, or I love Pema Chodron or the Dalai Lama, they would just look at me kindly and say, be careful there. And I understood that to mean, admire the teachings, not the teacher. Because whenever we put someone up on a pedestal, we inadvertently put ourselves down.
Right.
And to me, the invitation, when Shunryu Suzuki said, there are no enlightened people, there's only enlightened activity, that was very inviting for me.
I like that.
The people we perceive to be quote-unquote enlightened are simply people like you and I who've made enlightened activity a part of their daily lives.
Mm-hmm. And they're still human.
They're still human. And we're invited to do that as well. And in the eyes of others, we may seem enlightened, but it's just because we've made enlightened activity a part of our daily lives.
Mm-hmm. And I love the way you've explained that. Because that, I think, is the place of discontent and separation and struggle and fighting. And
hierarchy.
Yeah.
They're not higher, better than us, and we're not higher, better than someone who doesn't quite. That would be like saying someone in the 8th grade is better than someone in the 5th grade. They're just
They're just where they are.
They're just where they are,
Yeah.
and we need to respect that wherever that is. Mm-hmm. If someone is lying or cheating or stealing, I, for one, have been there at all of those places.
Yep.
And just because I'm not there anymore. And so there's no should of, oh, you're 50, you should know this by now. I haven't learned that yet, or someone hasn't learned it yet, or because of where they were raised or the family they haven't had an opportunity yet to pick up on that lesson. But every person you meet knows something that you don't, because they've learned something that you haven't. And if we see everyone we meet as our teacher, or as Gandhi said, if you can't find God in the next person you meet, there's no point in looking for him anywhere else.
Oh, wow. I love that. Timber Hawkeye, you're rocking my world and opening up my brain cells to some really great, juicy stuff. I so appreciate that. Timber has a book called The Buddhist Boot Camp. And we're going to take a short break. You're listening to Living Your Inspired Life on News Talk 1590 KVTA, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Living Your Inspired Life. I'm Susan Burrell, and if you've missed anything of our great conversation today, you can go to livingyourinspiredlife.org and get caught up, get tuned in and tuned up, and just live the life you were meant to live. And I have a couple of local announcements. You're listening to News Talk 1590 KVTA, and there's a couple upcoming events that I promised some people I would talk about. The Weave community, Women's Economic Venture Community, is having in Oxnard a get-together, a business get-together at a person who actually did the Weave program. It's called Downtown Soul. It's a gallery and handmade goods boutique, but they're doing a connection, a networking event on Thursday, October 24th from 5:30 to 7:30 at Downtown Seoul in Oxnard. And the address is 328 West 3rd Street in Oxnard. So if you've got a business and you want to get connected, this Weave group is all about connection. So show up there. And then we have also an exciting event coming up. The Ojai Film Festival is coming up, and it's one of my personal loves. Having been an ex-actress, I love film. And so that is coming up November 7th through the 11th. You can go to ojaifilmfestival.com. And the thing I love about the festival is that their through line, or whatever you want to call it, their hook, is about enriching the human spirit. So the films that we see at this festival are all about enriching the human spirit, connecting up and connecting in again. And there's also environmentally focused films that are being shown. And this one on Monday, November 11th at 8 o'clock, Living Your Inspired Life is sponsoring a screening of Barbara Marx Hubbard's movie called Visions. And that's going to be at 8 o'clock on November 11th. So I invite you, we're going to be talking more about that as we come in the next couple of shows, but I invite you to go to the website, ojaifilmfestival.com, and check it out. It's the weekend of November 7th through the 11th. So with that said, enough said, I have in the studio Timber Hawkeye. He's the author of Buddhist Boot Camp. And Timber, we've been having this juicy conversation about everything spiritual and yet nothing dogmatic. Thank you. And and I just want to share with everybody that's listening, your book has gone viral.
It has.
I'm like, you were telling me it's in schools are using this book now?
Yes, schools, public schools are using it as a required reading and part of their curriculum. Also using it in correctional facilities across the country with inmates who get free yoga and meditation classes.
Oh my God, I got chills on that. That's great.
It's amazing. It's available in multiple languages, and it's just Whole Foods just agreed to start carrying the book as well.
Okay, wait a minute. That's like huge. That's Whole Foods.
Yeah. It's a great spot for it, and just finished a cross-country book tour. Visited 36 independent bookstores across the country, and I'm going to the UK in December to do a cross-country book tour there as well.
Oh my God.
And it's all sponsored by fans of the book. All the book donations to the correctional facilities were made by fans of the book. The tour itself is sponsored by them. I'm not staying in hotels or anything like that. I'm sleeping on people's couches.
Wow.
And making it happen. And it's just an incredible journey of connection.
And something you shared with me before we came on air about the book, you shared that you didn't really write the book, and that what's happening isn't because you're out there promoting, you're just showing up. This is the next step. This is the next step of the journey. So this is like an independent, this is your service.
Yeah, it's, again, the book is a collection of emails and journal entries that I've kept over the years, and it would be no different than someone publishing their private journal. Mm-hmm. It's just when I thought of what do I name it, Buddhist Boot Camp was the first thing that came to mind. If I was going to give my diary a name, that's what it would be. And, it doesn't really have anything to do with Buddhism, but it was my friends who suggested that I make it public. Yeah.
And so the boot camp part, that's interesting to me. Did when you were writing all these things, did you feel like you were in essence in a boot camp? Or, I mean, where did that come from?
That came from, and I'm not promoting or in any way suggesting that people go out there and watch it, but every time I watched the movie Fight Club, I thought to myself, this is Buddhist Boot Camp, because it encapsulated a lot of the Buddhist principles and teachings into a very graphic and violent movie. Again, which is why I'm not necessarily suggesting that people go out there and watch it, but the violence in the movie depicts the internal conflict in all of us. Mm-hmm. And watching that for me with that level of rigidity, which is how I was raised, very military, is how I learned it best. I didn't want anything sugar-coated. I didn't want a lot of the flowery stories that I couldn't relate to in this day and age. I just give me the lesson. Mm-hmm. I can take it. Mm-hmm. And I can move on to the next one. But I don't know, didn't respond very well to the gentleness of it all. And yet, the book ended up being a whole lot gentler than I ever thought even I could be. So I learned a lot about myself by writing it.
Wow. It's interesting to hear you say that you came from a background or an upbringing of rigidity, and now, because I'm sitting across from you and you're like so calm and fluid and present and with a great sense of humor and intellect and everything. And
we are not who we were. We are who we choose to become.
I love that.
I'm not a victim of my past. None of us are.
Yeah. I'm certainly have been learning that in my lifetime too. And the rigidity thing does get in the way, and that sometimes tends to be a default mechanism for people, especially when we enter into situations that we find threatening or threatening. There's lots of scary stuff in your life, even if it's just looking at breaking up in a relationship.
Yeah.
So the default will always until we get our spiritual muscle really developed, our daily practice really centered, the default always is whatever we used to do.
And I think it's because of our choice of language. It's the words we use. We say things like, this is happening to me, or why is this happening to me? But if we change our vocabulary to, this is happening for me, that's a completely different experience. And one of the important points in the book is that making the distinction between a feeling and an emotion.
Oh, let's talk about that.
It's, feelings we all have. You drive down the road and somebody cuts you off and you get really, really angry. But then your favorite song comes on the radio and you get really, really happy. Then you get home and you find out the dog pooped on the floor and you get really upset. But then, your husband or wife come over with a dinner already made or whatnot, and you're relieved, and the feelings just go all over the place. Mm-hmm. And that's perfectly normal. A feeling lasts about 45 seconds to a minute and a half at most.
Really?
That's it.
Okay. So
but an emotion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. When we take a feeling and we build a story around it, and we start talking about it, and we start, the person who cut us off on the freeway, if we build a story around them, who they are and what they're doing and why they're doing it to us, and then we're on the phone and we tell the person about this person who cut us off and what kind of car they drove, and that must mean that they're a certain kind of person. And then we bring that hostility to home when we show up and we talk about this. That feeling that came and went, which could have just been gone when that song came on the radio, became an emotion. And that's how people stay angry about something for 20, 30 years, because they keep feeding that story. Whatever it was that someone did to you 20 years ago is come and gone. But if you're still angry about it today, it's because of the story built around it. And it's important that we don't identify with a temporary feeling. And again, it goes back to our language. It would be very honest for us to say, I'm feeling anger right now.
Yeah.
But instead we say, I am angry.
Oh.
We are identifying ourselves with a temporary feeling. It's as if we're putting it on like a jacket saying, I am angry. This is who I am.
This is who I am.
This is my identity.
Yep.
And then we approach the world and every situation from that place of anger, because we've become it. And it's toxic to ourselves and to everyone around us, and it doesn't do us any service. But to honor the feelings as a feeling, and not saying to stick your head in the mud and be a robot and not feel anything. Feel it. Feel all of it. And honor the fact that it's temporary. It'll pass and another feeling will take its place and you'll feel that one. And just be fluid. I think fluid. Fluid is really the...
Fluid is good. Okay, I'm labeling it. Fluid is good and fluid is hard. Just labeled it again. Because in my experience, having come out of rigidity and so I'm going through a divorce, right? And I thought that there would be this whole happily ever after until for the rest of my life, right? Not happening. It's just not happening. And it was such a rude awakening, and to become fluid in that experience, and it literally, I was in the emotion with the story. And I had to watch myself because I wanted to tell everybody the story, you know, and I
You validate the story every time you tell it.
Right.
You actually make it more real. It becomes your reality. And it's just your story. Your husband may have a different story. And that's his truth. That's his reality, which brings us back to the opposite of what you know is also true.
Right.
You may still live happily ever after. It just may not be together.
Right. And the process of getting to where I can, when those emotions amp up, I can begin to say, okay, that's a feeling. I don't have to go there. I don't have to go into the story. Now, if a feeling only lasts 45 seconds to a minute, right? Okay, then how the heck do I get out of the story and the emotion, Timber?
My friend has a really interesting practice to name her demons, so to speak.
Oh.
So if you're prone to anger or jealousy, call your jealousy Janet. And so when you start feeling like Janet's coming up and she's creeping, and you see her and you like, I see you coming, you know, I see.
Oh, wow, I love this.
Then you can say, okay, I see you, I acknowledge you, and you're not invited. And that way you nip it in the bud before she takes over you and you become Janet and you start behaving, talking out of jealousy.
Right.
You see it, you honor it, you bow to it, and then you just come back to who you are, which isn't jealous or anger. Or
right.
anything. And so, and we all have our different demons and whatnot, and insecurities or anger or whatever it is, and acknowledging them. It's not about pretending that we don't have feelings. You know, I get a lot of resistance from the female audience of saying, but I want to honor my feelings. I'm like, and if that's working for you, keep it up. But if it's not working for you, if you need constant validation of your sorrow, of your pain, of your how you've been wronged or whatever, and then you're reaching out to people, pulling them in and pulling them down with you, then it isn't working.
Right.
So when someone tells me something, anything, the first question I ask them is, how's that working out for you? And it invites them to go, well, it isn't. I'm like, then stop doing it. You know, that my dad told me a joke growing up about this guy who went to the doctor because every time he drank tea, his eye hurt. He's like, every time I drink tea, doc, my eye hurts. And it turns out that he just left the spoon inside the teacup and he poked himself in the eye. And so it's about looking in and going, how am I contributing to my own suffering and how can I end it?
Oh, yeah. And that's a bigger one. How am I contributing? Because we've been indoctrinated to look outside of ourselves and see how everyone or thing or the government or the whatever is doing it to me.
No.
And that's not what's true at all.
Because you can be in the middle of chaos and be calm. You can be in a frustrating situation and not get frustrated. It's a choice. Like Carlos Castaneda said, you can make yourself happy, you can make yourself miserable. The amount of work is the same.
Yes, it is.
It's a choice. So when we realize that happiness is a choice and that it's available to us right here and now, then we start realizing that what we've been taught to quote unquote pursue happiness is one of the biggest lies, because it's not out there for us to pursue.
Thank you.
It's in our hearts to discover.
Thank you.
But when you make it a pursuit, you're in our language, again, we're suggesting that it's far away and we have to do certain things to get there. When I worked with the high school students, I asked them, you know, what do you see as success? How do you define it? You know, where is your happy place? And they're like, oh, well, we need to graduate high school. We need to go to college. We need to get married, have 3 kids, have a 3-car garage. I'm like, wow, you have to do all of that before you can be happy?
Scary.
Wow. And a matter of fact, have you ever met anyone who's done all of those things and actually is happy? No one could raise their hand, because we've never actually seen. It's like we're all being sold a recipe to follow and guaranteed that when we follow it, there's going to be an end result. And we've never seen that recipe actually work out, and yet we follow it. It doesn't really make sense.
No, it doesn't.
But a lot of us are waking up to realize, wait a minute, it's not about following somebody else's path. It's about creating our own. And it's not about if we're lost and we can't find. A lot of times we see an obstacle and go, oh, well, that's not the path. Actually, the obstacle is the path.
Yep.
I forget.
And I hate that part sometimes.
Well, how's that working out for you?
I know. Well, I get, I have red hair. I get a little stubborn about it. I have to stomp my feet, and then I just go, all right, let's look at the obstacle and deal with it.
find a way to get over it. And you'll find that when you get there, someone else has gotten over it before. People will show up in your life to help you get over it, to give you tips, to leave the hiking boots you need to hike over it, whatever it is. And that's your journey. You've overcome it. So when it comes up again, not only can you overcome it, but you can help someone who needs help. It's just, we can't stop when there's an obstacle on our path. The obstacle is the path.
You know, and as you're saying that too, Timber, I'm hearing that the now it's kind of an old phrase, the pay it forward thing. And that's part of the gratitude, so you pay it backwards to leave the hiking boots for somebody else to hike over.
Well, or unless you're a hoarder and then you keep them in case you need them one day.
Right, then there's that. Oh, I guess I got to go through my closet again. Oops.
Again. And then when you're done, go through it again.
Again.
Yes.
But there's also this thing of setting a tone, an intentional tone for your life journey, so to speak, of making sure that you're developing. You know what I'm hearing is this place of gratitude.
Yeah.
And then in the gratitude there becomes generosity because I want to help other people because I just went through this.
And gratitude turns what we have into enough. We quite often don't give because we feel we don't have enough because there's so much we need and want, quote unquote.
Yeah.
But if we realize that we can be grateful for what we already have, then we can live in abundance and luxury. And then we're more prone to give to others. And I think we're here for each other. And it's just this wonderful cycle of generosity and kindness and giving. And you get more of what you give. And it's an endless loop of joy or fear and hoarding and clenching and not giving. And what you resist persists. And it's just this whole cycle. And again, is that working out for you?
Right.
So and it's okay to admit, something worked for me for the first 20 years of my life and it's no longer serving me.
That's a big one. I'm working with a lot of people right now that, and I'm calling it a crossroads, that are coming to me because their children have grown up and left the house, or they're like me, going through a divorce, or there's been a sudden death, or they're hitting 40 or 50 or 60 going, who am I? Or
25. There's a quarter life crisis going on.
Really?
Yeah. So, and it's because we identify again with something temporary. And I had a question during one of my book talks. There was this older lady, and I mentioned the danger of identifying with what's going on right now, and she raised her hand and said, "Why is that a problem?" She's like, "I'm Nana. I'm a grandmother, and that's who I am." I'm like, you're in your 70s. You've only been Nana for about 4 years. You are so much more than that. And if for whatever reason something happens and you're not a Nana anymore, does that mean you've lost your identity? And so we identify as being a husband or, a worker bee or whatever it is. And if we lose our job, do we lose our identity? No. We just can't identify with these temporary things.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and that's what a majority of people are doing that. And I think it is part of what's being reflected in the outer world of circumstance we're seeing, where situations, constructs are literally falling apart because we're being called. Now I'm just saying this is the royal we, right? This is the general we, as opposed to them. But the we's, we're being called to really develop more of the truth of who we are. Yeah. And become really present with it.
And not judge it and realize that we may be something else tomorrow and be okay with that as well. And it's about being gentle with ourselves, forgiving, compassion. It all starts with us. If we stop judging ourselves, we will stop judging other people when we look at them. It starts with us.
Okay, so I've kind of worked backwards on that, I think. Can you speak a little bit about the judgment thing, Timber? Because, I'm really good about loving myself now. I'm really happy with me. But that judgment thing still, and this probably harkens back to the rigidity of my, youth. So how do you...
So you find yourself rigid with others, but not with yourself?
No, with myself. Well, I guess with other people
both.
Too, yeah.
Yeah.
It goes both ways.
It goes both ways. The moment you allow yourself to be where you are, I remember when I was going through therapy, my therapist sent me home with a CD. It was Alanis Morissette, and there's a song on it called That I Would Be Good.
Oh.
And it's like, I would be good even if I gained 10 pounds, even if I filed bankruptcy, even if I'm no longer queen, even if I'm not all knowing.
Right.
And I will be loved even when I'm needy, even, and just knowing that I would be good no matter what, and loving. And that invites us to unconditionally love ourselves, not in a selfish way. And by doing that, then we can be gentle with others when we encounter someone else who is 10 pounds overweight according to our definition of what we often don't know their story.
Right.
They may be at the lightest weight of their lives, and it doesn't matter. It's not for us. And the moment we're okay with who we are, we can be okay with who others are.
Yeah. Yeah.
It starts with us.
It does start with us. And it's a life process. Yeah.
It is, especially when the media and whatnot tells us that we need to look a certain way in order to be loved and whatnot. And so we judge ourselves when we look in the mirror, thereby judging others. It's just, we are what we eat. And we don't just eat with our mouths, we eat with our eyes and our ears. And so if we're listening to the news, if we're listening to media, to magazines that tell us we need to look a certain way, we become that. And a lot of this stuff in the media is fear-based, it's paranoia-based, and we become fearful and paranoid. And we have to be extremely mindful of what it is that we are consuming, and consumers is what we are.
Right.
And if we're mindful of what comes in to our bodies, to our minds, to our hearts, then we can be mindful of what comes out, and we can create a cycle of real positive change in our lives and other people's lives.
Right. And it does begin with you. And as you're speaking, Timber, what I'm also hearing is this place of, because when you were talking about the media and the fear, there's a lot of people that I'm talking to that are just plain amped up because there's so much fear in the outer world, and they don't even know that it may not even be their fear.
No,
it's like the fear of the consciousness on the planet right now.
That's what I realized when I gave up television, newspapers, radios, magazines, all of that back in 1999. I think Ally McBeal was on at the time, if that gives you a time reference. And at first, the only difference I noticed is I didn't have anything to talk to people about around the water cooler at work. But after a few years of this, I realized that all my thoughts were now my own.
Oh,
and so when you said the fear isn't yours, that's the first thing that came to mind, is it's not. And our thoughts are not even our own. We're given them, and we just say, oh, okay, that's what I'm going to feel about flying, or that's what I'm going to feel about going to the mall today. It's just, it's not innate in us to want to lock our doors and live in fear.
No.
We're taught that from a very early age, and it's not a service to us.
No, it's not a service to us. What I know for me is to counter, or I don't even know if I want to say counterbalance, but to balance that for me is to then ground myself in more love within myself. And I try, my practice is, one of my mantras, if you will, is I am love, and I move and live and have my being in an atmosphere of love. And I try and practice that before I even leave my home.
Yeah, that's similar to, and it is a counter. It's I've been sitting with the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi since 1993. And what I like about his approach is it's very antidotal. So there is the counter, the antidote to whatever it is. And I did have to make a slight modification to the prayer.
Would you say it?
I certainly could. The prayer as written is, it starts off by saying, make me an instrument of thy peace. And I had an issue with that, again, language-wise. And I don't know if it's because English is my second language and I'm really sensitive to it. But by saying, make me an instrument of thy peace, it implies that I'm not already.
Ooh, yes.
And so I'm starting my day from a place of lack, from a place of less than, and saying, please make me something that I'm not. And, wherever there's hatred, I shall sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there's doubt, faith. Where there's despair, hope. Where there's darkness, light. And where there's sadness, joy. And it goes on to say, grant that I shall not so much seek to be consoled as to console. And again, it comes from a place of, being granted that, as opposed to being empowered to say, today I will make the intention to not so much seek to be consoled. And so you're empowering yourself
Yes.
with these words, and you come out of your meditation or prayer just feeling one with God, one with the universe, one with whatever it is you're comfortable calling
It.
Bob, if that
Right.
works for you. I have a friend who sends all his prayers out to Bob. Because the name you give it doesn't matter as much as the appreciation you have for it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the gratitude is where it is. So Buddhist Boot Camp focuses a lot on gratitude. In the schools and all the events, there's often a gratitude wall. It just stops people to say, what are you grateful for?
Oh, I love that.
It's really, and so people are creating this in their home. They get a chalkboard, they put it up on the board, and they stop with their children and they write things they're grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
Schools are doing it. People in their homes. I have one in my home, a little chalkboard. And my roommate and I write things we're grateful for. So
I think that's a brilliant practice.
Mhm.
You know, I often enlist clients that are having issues that are they can't get over to do that kind of a
Yeah.
practice. Make a list.
it changes your focus from what don't I have to what do I have.
Mhm.
And then you feel really rich and really empowered. And you have all the tools, you know. Asking for strength implies you don't already have it.
Right.
Saying thank you for the strength taps you into its unlimited supply.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we're not. And I really think that human beings are not broken.
Mm-mm.
We've been again indoctrinated, vaccinated to think that we are, so that whatever that means, right? But we're not. There's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
We just have
And
to come
if
to
you
ourselves.
believe that there is something wrong and all that, and that works for you, great. The book may not be for you, but but otherwise, we have monthly get-togethers for Buddhist Boot Camp right in Camarillo at the Center for Spiritual Living.
Yes, there's one coming up.
Last Saturday of every month, we all get together, and it's just a space for anyone to come and discuss whatever they want, and it's a very non-judging environment.
Mm-hmm.
People put questions and whatnot. We discuss either chapters from the book or from any book, or inspirational quotes without mentioning who they're of, just in case someone has any hang-ups about don't you dare quote the Dalai Lama or whatever it is.
And that's the third Saturday.
Last Saturday of every month.
Okay, last Saturday of every month from when to when?
From 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Center for Spiritual Living in Camarillo.
Center for Spiritual Living in Camarillo. And so I know you can go to CamarilloCSL.org and
I don't know if they have it on their website. I know if you go to BuddhistBootCamp.com, it lists all the events. There's book talks, there's gatherings. We're doing a full-day retreat at the center. They agreed to host, to offer their space.
And that's coming up in January, yes?
It'll be a really good way to start the new year. January 4th, the first Saturday, from, I believe, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And it'll include a meditation, some yoga, and it'll just be a really nice opportunity to figure out ways to bring to practice what it is we believe. Because again, our beliefs don't make us better people. Our behavior does.
Our behavior does. And so, Timber, your website, BuddhistBootCamp.com, tell everybody a little bit about what happens on your website, because I really want people to go and check out.
Well, it started out as a blog, so it was continually updated. Now it's more of a place to gather information from about what's going on elsewhere, like events, the book tour across the UK, suggested reading, any information update there, and mostly on Facebook, which is the source that people go to. Instead of creating another place for people to have to go to, get them where they already are.
Right.
And Facebook seems to be there's over 150,000 people on there. It's just unbelievable.
Wow.
And from all over the world. It's fantastic.
Wow. So I want to just share one more thing that I love about your book. Besides that, it's in what I was saying earlier, pops. You can get like a great contemplative idea in
Out of
2
a paragraph,
pages.
yeah.
Right. And the other thing I like is I personally am a quote person, and I like to know who.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
so I appreciate the end of every
chapter has a quote in it.
has a quote, which just resonates with what you've just spoken about.
It encapsulates ideas. I think quotes really help us because they're quick, they're short, and they really resonate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really appreciate them. So I thought it'd be important to put them in there, and I'm grateful for the book being the way it came to be.
Yeah. It sounds that it was very organic, which...
Absolutely. The whole thing, there's no, I mean, it's a $10 book. There's no marketing campaign behind it. There's no big media push.
That's the thing that's so awesome to
Yeah.
me, is that it's just going viral without any effort on your part. It's just happening.
There's the constant intention. There's the continuous dialogue. There's the being present with bookstores and fans and continually being out there and answering questions. There's a lot of effort.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
There's just no monetary. It's not for. I mean, people ask, how much money the book is making, and it cracks me up because there's the assumption that authors make a lot of money, but that's not the case.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when HarperCollins decided to publish the book, I insisted that it remained very affordable. And about $10 for a hardcover is an extremely great price.
Yeah,
so.
that's so unusual.
Yeah.
And I just want to share with everybody the back of the book. It says your intention is to awaken, enlighten, enrich, and inspire.
Yeah.
I love that. And you were saying something right before we went on air also of strength and courage being a part of all that.
Strength, Courage, and Wisdom was the song that was played by India Ari.
Right.
And it's Strength, Courage, and Wisdom. It's been inside of me all along.
Yes, it has. Yes.
We tend to forget, and that's what the book is. It's just a reminder of what we already know. Spoiler alert, there's nothing in the book you don't already know. It just reminds us of what we have forgotten.
Yeah. And gives you a great place to remember by tapping into it.
Absolutely.
Timber Hawkeye, I am just so deeply grateful that you've joined us here today. And I want to make sure that you come back again for whatever other promotional thing I can do for you to get this out in the world. And the fact that Whole Foods is picking this up.
It's brilliant.
It is brilliant. And the fact that you're putting it into schools where other...
I'm not doing this.
But
It's not my book. It's our book. People have really embraced it as their own. It's not mine. It's ours.
And that people get it. It just says to me that there's been a hunger and a thirst for a connection to self, and you've presented it in such a simple way.
Yeah, there's no glossary. There's no difficult terms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I just love it. So the book is called Buddhist Boot Camp, and it's by Timber Hawkeye. And Timber, I am just so grateful that you were here. I cannot wait to have you back again and see what else we can talk about. So this is Living Your Inspired Life. If you've missed anything of today's show, just go to livingyourinspiredlife.org and you can get tuned in and tuned up and live the life you were meant to live. So I'm just going to end with, and so it is, namaste.
Namaste.
What do I want? What do I desire? What will bring me to my highest good? What do I want? What do I desire? What will bring me to my highest good? Prosperity, prosperity. I claim it, I claim it. Abundance, abundance is mine, is mine. Love, love flows through me, flows through me. I feel joy, I feel joy all the time, all the time. I can have it, I can have it. I deserve it, I deserve it. I claim it, I claim it. It is mine, it is mine. I can have it, 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 I can.